Monday night gave us a blue moon and a super moon, but the DNC has given us the longest week ever, and it's only Wednesday. Someone please make it stop. The show starts now. So last night, the two most popular Democrats ever took the stage. And no, I'm not talking about Kamala or that creepy Tim Walz. They weren't even there. I'm talking about the real leaders of not only the Democrat Party, but likely the puppet masters of the current administration as well, Barack and Michelle Obama.
It's up to us to remember what Kamala's mother told her. Don't just sit around and complain. Do something. So if they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs? Yes, Kamala and Tim are doing great now. We're loving it. They're packing arenas across the country. Folks are energized. We are feeling good. But remember, there are still so many people who are desperate for a different outcome. See, because the minute something goes wrong, the minute a lie takes hold, folks, we cannot start wringing our hands. We cannot get a Goldilocks complex about whether everything is just right.
History will remember Joe Biden as an outstanding president who defended democracy at a moment of great danger. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse. America's ready for a new chapter. America's ready for a better story. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
Well, those two, along with Nancy Pelosi, of course, not only got Joe Biden out of the way, but they set Operation Coconut Tree in motion. You know, I don't think they helped coronate Kamala because they like Kamala. Nobody likes Kamala. I think they helped coronate Kamala because a Kamala presidency would be an opportunity for the Obamas to control the country for a 4th term. Kamala is easy to control, just like Joe is, and obviously, and was the whole time. The radical agenda of both Joe and Kamala has Barack's fingerprints all over it. But Obama is a political mastermind and genius. He has a way of pulling the pin on the grenade and walking away with clean hands. That's why he's managed to stay so objectively popular with Americans on the left and even the right, because he has everyone else do his dirty work for him. A Kamala presidency would be no different. These other cats at the DNC, including Doug Emhoff, might think they're important, but they aren't. They actually don't matter at all unless Barack, Michelle, and Nancy say they do. Joining me now with what I'm sure will be a very different take from the one I just gave you, on night 2 of the never-ending DNC, by the way, is digital strategist and CEO of Espora, Sergio José Gutiérrez. Sergio, are you electrified by the DNC? I think I've heard that word electric about 5 million times, and it's only Wednesday.
Yes, I am, and I think we all are. It has been a long week, and still 2 more days to go.
So you admit it's been a long week. I mean, it's been a long week for me, but I thought you guys were living it up. I thought you guys were enjoying the vibes and everything.
I mean, it's a joyful moment for digital strategists, of course, because we are learning a lot. But at the end, to have 4 days in a row with a lot of speeches that are pre-written and that they are so easy to foresee. I mean, it's not that simple. One can get very tired.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, and this thing has been going so late into the night. It's really hard to stay awake for. I mean, I'm shocked that Joe Biden stayed awake when they put him on, on the late show on Monday night after everybody else. But last night, the Obamas spoke. Obviously, everybody at that convention very excited about the Obamas. The Democrat Party still very much in love with the Obamas. Between the two speeches, do you think that they did the job that they needed to do? Do you think that they energized that crowd and advocated for Kamala Harris as much as they could have?
Well, on one hand, Michelle Obama's speech was better in order to endorse Kamala. While the former President Obama's speech, it was not really about Kamala, but it was about his own agenda. It was pretty much like the one Biden did yesterday or 2 days ago. It was about their own agenda. They were not about Kamala. Michelle's, it was. She talked a little bit about the struggles Kamala lived in her life, and it might have helped her a little bit. But in such a polarized country like United States, it wouldn't change a vote, any of those speeches. Won't change anything.
Wow, I'm really surprised to hear you say that. One thing that I was really taken aback by within the first maybe 30 seconds of Michelle Obama's speech, it seemed to me like she really dogged out Biden pretty badly. I mean, she was talking about how everything was really dismal and now hope is making a comeback, as if Joe Biden hasn't been in office for 3.5 years, and as if Joe Biden, a Democrat, isn't president right now with Vice President Kamala Harris, by the way. But did you take that as a dig at Joe Biden from Michelle Obama? I certainly did.
It's a political trick. It was a change speech, the one that Michelle Obama did. And while former President Obama's speech was more a fear speech. But the Michelle Obama speech, I mean, it was a change speech, but regarding the Trump administration, not regarding the Joe Biden administration. Still, I insist, with all this week and all these speeches, nothing is going to change, because right now, American politics have a new phenomenon that is called the footballization of politics, which means that most of the people is voting against the other party. They're not voting for Kamala, they're voting against Trump, the Democrat supporters. And a lot of the Trump supporters are not voting for Trump, but also voting against Biden, Obama, and Kamala. So this footballization of politics is because of the polarization America is living. And you have 45% of the people against the other 45% of the people. So none of the campaigns are actually talking to that remaining on the side 10%, which are libertarian Latinos, rural women, and veterans.
Okay. Well, you make up a good point. It's one that I've been making as well. I do think Trump supporters and Trump voters are really voting for Trump. I think they really like Trump. That's why we saw when he went through an actual primary that he won, pretty decidedly early on. Kamala has not gone through the primary process. She didn't get actually a single delegate in both times that she's now running for president. So I think it's interesting, that they've decided to coronate her in this way. She and Tim Walz chose not to be at the convention last night. Now, Fox News reporting from unnamed sources said that maybe she did that because she didn't want to be disrespectful to Joe Biden by being there when the Obamas are giving their big butt kissery speech about Kamala. She didn't want to be there because it looks bad. It makes Joe feel bad. I quite frankly don't think Joe gives a damn. I think Joe's licking an ice cream cone somewhere in California. But were you surprised that Kamala chose not to be there, not even for her own husband's speech?
Yeah, that was surprising. And I think it has to do something about what you're saying. But you say that people in the Republican Party really like Trump, as he showed in the primaries. But I believe, and our research have proved, that it's not really that they like him. They prefer him, which is different. And they prefer Trump because he was the most likely to win the election against the Obamas, Kamala, Biden, and all the Democrats. That base, the Midwest, and the rural part of America, and the libertarians really hates.
Yeah. I slightly disagree because I think that the love of Donald Trump within the Republican Party is still so strong. I don't think it's ever left since 2016. I think that he has been, of our party, really the rock star, and I don't see that changing really anytime soon. Even if he were to lose, I don't think that changes. There's another part of Michelle Obama's speech that's getting a lot of play, and I want your reaction to it. She talked about how her parents were suspicious of people who took more than they needed or had more than they needed. Let's take a listen to this point, and I want to get your reaction of the hypocrisy.
You see, my mom, in her steady, quiet way, lived out that striving sense of hope every single day of her life. She believed that all children, all people have value, that anyone can succeed if given the opportunity. She and my father didn't aspire to be wealthy. In fact, they were suspicious of folks who took more than they needed. They understood that it wasn't enough for their kids to thrive if everyone else around us was drowning.
I'm confused because the Obamas are worth about $70 million, maybe more. They have at least 3 homes, mansions, not homes. So do you find that a little odd that she's talking about not taking more than you need? I think the Obamas probably have quite a bit more than they need.
Well, that's the rhetoric of politics, right? That's when someone has to address an audience and they talk in a way they can relate to them. So yeah, that speech doesn't make any sense with today's Obama's income or assets, but it might to the former generation of Obamas.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting when you talk about how we shouldn't take more than we need, and then you're making like $1 million for a speech in a foreign country. Kind of weird to me that she would even say that, knowing the glaring hypocrisy that was quickly pointed out by me and many, many others on social media. But I want to talk about another phenomenon at the DNC this week. I'm sure that you've seen it. The protests, the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic protests. We have plenty of footage of it last night at the Israeli consulate, obviously getting really wild. It seemed as though these protesters wanted to antagonize police officers, maybe wanted the spectacle of it. They were burning Israeli flags. They were burning American flags. All of this, they're not getting close to the convention itself anymore, but it's happening. And I'm wondering if you think that the DNC and the Democrat Party is doing enough to address this, or if you feel like they're kind of ignoring it for some reason or another.
I think they are kind of ignoring it, but I also think that this protest is not organic. It is planned for a political intention. But yes, I agree with you. They are not addressing this enough. And they won't address this enough because this, to be in favor against the Israel and Gaza situation, changes the odds in this election.
I just wonder, though, if those people that are out there and they're burning the flags and they're quite obviously saying anti-Semitic things, I mean, does the Democrat Party really want the votes of those people? I mean, I know they'll take votes from whoever, dead or alive, but I don't know if the optics of it, I know they're trying to appease everybody, but I don't know if that calculation for Democrats is correct to coddle these folks. It seems like a miscalculation to me. Do you think these people actually make a difference in states like Michigan?
I agree that it is a miscalculation when you are thinking only in votes, but you have to think also about sponsors.
What do you mean by sponsors?
Those people who are investing in the campaign or in super PACs. The money that is being invested in super PACs, some of it comes from people in favor or against this situation. So I think they're calculating the response regarding this, not regarding the votes, but regarding the money.
Okay. It's interesting, though, because we know that in some of these primaries that prominent left-wing Democrats have lost, it's actually been AIPAC and other Israel-aligned PACs that have contributed a lot of money against people like Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. So interesting to see that calculation. I also find it to be a miscalculation, but either way, I don't really care because I'm not a Democrat. One thing I am concerned about, though, because there is a maybe 50-50 shot Kamala is my president come January of next year, which terrifies and horrifies me. But to me, the little bitsy bits that we've gotten from her economic agenda, they ring really socialist/communist in nature. And another speaker last night, Bernie Sanders, no surprise, really had a socialist message that he doesn't consider radical. But I'm wondering if you consider it radical. Let's take a listen.
And let me tell you what else we must do. We need to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a human right, not a privilege. I look forward to working with Kamala and Tim to pass this agenda. And let us be very clear. This is not a radical agenda.
Is it a radical agenda? To me, it sounds pretty radical.
Bernie Sanders' agenda is always radical. He's known for that. But I don't think that would be the agenda that would be implemented by Kamala once in office. Once officials are in office, they get more centered. But yeah, his agenda is radical, of course.
So normally I would agree with you that people become more moderate once they get into office. But with Joe Biden, it was actually the opposite of that. He ran as a moderate. And then when he became president, he put in an agenda that was far more progressive and radical than I believe many people assumed when they voted for him. I believe if the Democrat Party did put up a radical, they would have lost the 2020 election, but they put up a moderate seeming person in Joe Biden, and that's why they were able to get a foothold, because people thought that he was reasonable. He's turned out to be anything but reasonable. He's turned out to be anything but awake, in my opinion. But I'm wondering your thoughts on some of the things that Kamala has brought up here and there. Price fixing, that's a little bit of a problem. $25,000 to new home buyers paid for by I don't know who. That might be a problem when you consider inflation and also housing costs, and this talk about letting the Trump tax cuts expire and the capital gains tax that she wants to put in place, supposedly. A lot of those things feel very radical to a lot of folks who actually look at the economy. You're not concerned.
A lot of those things look like just campaign promises, not really feasible things, hopefully. But there's one that really surprised me. The fixed prices for food. That control really surprised me because this is not only radical, but rather controversial. There is not a clear or unified idea of that in the country, not even within Democrats. Actually, in our research, we have like 60% of Democrats would be against that control. It's way too left, even for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, it's socialist, it's communist. That's what communist and socialist nations put into play, and has not worked anywhere. So I'm personally pretty concerned about it. I want to turn to Tim Walz. Tonight he's going to get his big speech. We're going to learn more about Tim Walz. I had imagined that during his speech he's not going to talk about a few things. He's probably not going to talk about his stolen valor. He's probably not going to talk about the fact that he seemingly lied about IVF. I'm going to play that clip in a moment. But he's probably also not going to talk about the failing schools in Minnesota, probably not going to talk about letting Minnesota burn to the ground during the race riots of 2020, and probably not going to talk about the COVID protocols, which had him have law enforcement paintball people who didn't respect COVID protocols. I mean, Tim Walz is also a radical, and he's also kind of weird. Are you a fan?
No, I am not a fan, but I think that there are formulas that they have used in the past, both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, to choose the best VP nominee. And they always are regarding balances. They can choose a VP regarding geographical balance. If you are from the North, you can choose someone from the South. If you are from the coast, from the West Coast, you can choose someone from the East Coast or from the Midwest, etc. Or you can have another formula that is a demographical formula, which is, for example, if you are young, you can choose someone old. If you're a Black person, you can choose a white person. And there's a third formula, which is a trust balance, which means, for example, Obama, he was too young, too unexperienced, and too much of a minority. So they chose Joe Biden, who was older, more experienced, and a white person, right? But when they chose Tim Walz, it was a geographical balance, but also a demographical balance. He is supposed to be very keen in education. He is a person who can relate more to rural people. And he's not a minority, and he's a lot older than Kamala. So these were his assets. He could bring into the table. He could contribute in many ways to the Democratic presidential ticket, especially because he could talk to rural women and those interested in education. But
Well, I
right
want to
now,
ask you this. Do you think I mean, I am somebody who grew up in South Dakota, small state, rural state, grew up in an agriculture state to a family who worked in livestock and agriculture for generations. Tim Walz doesn't speak to me as a rural woman, because most rural women, when they think about putting tampons in the boys' bathroom, that's a little weird to us, especially in South Dakota. Like, to me, he doesn't like ring true like this good old boy from the Midwest. I know he likes to wear camo and flannels, but tampons in the boys' bathroom, that feels really California.
yeah, it is not enough, of course, but it would be easier for you to relate to him than to Kamala.
No,
I
I
mean,
don't think so.
no,
I think he's weirder than Kamala. Like, I don't relate to Kamala in any sense other than she's a female and I'm a female. But Tim Walz to me seems so weird. I don't think he relates to people in the Midwest. I think he's a weirdo. I think he dances weird. I think he acts weird. I think his wife saying that she wants to smell the burning tires of the race riots is weird. I think everything about his past is weird. I think him lying about IVF is weird. Like, to me, he just seems like a pathological liar and a weirdo. Interesting,
and
because he's the one that coined the term weird for Donald Trump and JD Vance.
yeah, and this is because you're a Republican woman as well. And he wouldn't be addressing to you, but those Democrats, rural women that are not really in favor of Kamala yet. That's what he's trying to aim for. But also I mean, he can talk to the veterans. I'm not saying he is the perfect choice, but that's how the decision was made. Maybe not a perfect decision. Maybe he's not the perfect person. But this is why the Republican Party and the Trump campaign is putting at stake his credibility. And maybe he deserves that. But that's why he's having problem right now talking about anything, because of the IMF exaggeration or because of all these things that you just mentioned. But still, he was a balance with Kamala. While on the other hand, JD Vance, he's not really a balance to Trump besides age.
Yeah.
He's just like a mini Trump. He's very proud of Trump. He addressed the same people. He has the same narrative. So at the end, he's really not adding anything new to the table besides his age.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a good point when they need to talk to rural women as well. I mean, rural women are going to define the elections. Also, libertarian Latinos, second or third generation of Latinos who are in favor of Trump's ideology, but they don't like Trump hate against foreign Latinos. So they have to find a way to talk to them. So
Okay.
I think that's why Tim Walz, I mean, he can talk to some women, not successfully, as you just proved, but he could, and to veterans and to those interested in education. But yes, I think the Republican Party is doing a very good job right now, putting at stake his credibility.
Yeah, he's weird. He's weird and he's a liar. And he just creeps me out, to be honest. Another person that creeps me out is Doug Emhoff. Doug Emhoff creeps me out. I think he's weird. And I think his family is weird. His daughter showed up to night one of the DNC wearing like a flesh-colored tank top and a camo hat. I just thought that was wildly inappropriate, but whatever, maybe I'm a prude. Last thing I want to ask you is, if you were to give advice to the Trump campaign on how to campaign against Kamala, what would your advice to that side of the ticket be?
I think that campaigns shouldn't waste time in America right now campaigning against each other. They should rather focus not in that 90% of United States that is already decided, but they should focus in those 6 to 10 states that are still tight or toss up, and focus specifically in rural women, libertarian Latinos, and veterans. Those are the ones who are going to define the election. They're going to decide the elections. The rest of the people, that 90% of the constituents, have already decided their vote. And some of them are in favor of their own candidate, and most of them are just against the other candidate. So they should get the parties continue their own speech to their own people, but Trump or Kamala should address that remaining 10% only. All the resources should be there. So Trump must find a way to talk to Latinos, and he must find a way to talk to women, rural women specifically. He can get the urban women.
Yeah. And suburban women. Suburban women.
Suburban and rural. Yeah. Let's say non-urban women. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you on that point. He's got to do that. And I think that he's working on it, but definitely more attention needs to be placed there on that side. I don't know how Kamala makes up the difference, but she's at least, awake. And that was more than the Democrat Party had in a Joe Biden, who was on vacation again. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight. I certainly appreciate it. Good luck to all of us who have to stay up and listen to more DNC speeches tonight.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, folks. ICE has admitted that a staggering number of unaccompanied minors who came across the border illegally are, wait for it, unaccounted for. Cue the liberal outrage and hysteria? I doubt it. But it's time for final thoughts. Well, get a load of this. According to the DHS Inspector General, tens of thousands at least of illegal immigrant unaccompanied minors who illegally crossed our border in the last 5 years, mostly under Kamala and Joe, are unaccounted for, meaning they are roaming our country somewhere with someone, and the federal government doesn't really know where or with whom. The report also notes ICE has no assurance these unaccompanied minors are safe from trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor. So given this huge F-up by the Biden-Harris administration, I'd assume AOC is getting all of her white outfits ready to go for her crying photo op, but I won't hold my breath. And look, this isn't ICE's fault either. They're overwhelmed. They have millions of illegals, including criminal aliens and even aliens on the terror watch list they have to track down, no thanks to Democrats and their precious sanctuary cities. So it's also important to note these unaccompanied minor illegal aliens are unaccounted for because they failed to show up for their scheduled immigration court hearings. Shocker. But it may not be their fault, though, because at least a percentage of them are probably stuck in human or sex trafficking rings outside of their control. And this is exactly what happens when Democrats get into office and they open up the friggin' border. Millions come in and they disappear into the shadows. Some end up being terrorists, rapists, or murderers, and some end up being terrorized, raped, or murdered. And that's why this whole crock of crap from Democrats about compassion is so infuriating. An open border free-for-all isn't compassionate to anyone, not to Americans, not to these unaccompanied kids who fall victim to cartels and criminal organizations. These liberals clutch their pearls at Trump's policies. They cry over so-called kids in cages and DNA testing at the border. They scream at the notion of mass deportations, but they're noticeably not so enraged when their own president and vice president oversee not only a mass invasion, but play part in a massive human trafficking operation fueled and abetted by their policies. What a joke. Those are just my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Also catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation whenever you like. And please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care.